Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us this evening. We're going to get started in about a minute or so. In the meantime, please feel free to check out your resource widget to download things that we have there on the side, and we will begin shortly. Thanks. All right, we'll get started. Thank you for joining us for Foundational Skills Instruction in Action. This month's guests today are Tori Stiller, who is an SAP Literacy Specialist, and Joyce Harrison, who's joining us from Shelby County Schools. And I am your host from the Professional Learning Team, and I'm Nicole Bravo. So we thought we'd start off with a poll to see how many Core Advocate webinars you have attended. Is this your first one? Are you a pro and you've been to about 16 or more? Please take a few seconds to answer for us. And for those of you who don't know our network of Core Advocates, they're a group of people who believe that the power of standards can prepare all students for college and career. They are also collaborating with their communities, their colleagues, in helping translate the shift into instructional practice. And these Core Advocates have the tools and knowledge to advocate for high quality instruction, instructional resources, and professional learning communities. So our poll results looks like most people on this webinar. So the first one, welcome. We hope that you will continue to join us in the future. And we have some who have done 1 to 5, and then 6 to 10, and then a few pros with 11 to 15. I'm going to take a minute to go over what you might be seeing on your screen right now. You'll see on the bottom there's a Q&A widget. If you have any questions for us as the presentation's going, feel free to type in a question. We will answer as soon as we can. And these questions will only be seen by us. It won't be shared out to everybody. And then there's also a blue box with comments, and that's the group chat. Feel free to introduce yourselves to each other, ask questions amongst colleagues. Just feel free to chat on there. And then there's a Twitter icon. If you want to tweet with us or see any tweets that are coming in, you can view it there. And now I'd like to introduce Tori Stiller. She's a literacy specialist on the professional learning team with Student Achievement Partners. And Tori, you can take it from here.
Great. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. Really excited to dig into this content and share with you one of our new tools, the Foundational Skills Observation Tool. As Nicole said, we're going to be using those the widgets from the bottom of your screen throughout today's session, and I see many of you are already hopping on the group chat. You can use that throughout today to make comments, ask questions, talk to each other, really let us know whatever's on your mind. All right. So wanted to get a little bit of an idea of who is out there today. So if you could take a minute to click the screen and note which best describes your role currently. We have teacher of K-2, teacher 3rd grade and up, specialist, administrator, or other. Just take a moment to let us know who you are and what you do. If you're typing your answer into the group chat box right now, you can actually look on your screen and click one of the bubbles to participate in the poll. Thanks. Great, looks like we got folks from all over, really exciting. So wanted to let you know before we share the poll results some of the goals of today's webinar. We're going to accomplish a few things today. First and foremost, we're going to be learning and engaging in some thinking together. And the first goal is around understanding really what this tool is all about and getting a little bit comfortable with the structure of the tool itself. The second thing we're going to be looking at for the biggest chunk of time tonight is thinking about how we're going to see what high-quality foundational skills instruction looks like in the classroom. So we're going to do that by digging into what the indicators of the tool really mean and thinking about some examples from a mock lesson. And the last thing we're going to ask you to think about at the end, but also throughout, is thinking about how you might use this tool in your own setting to support high-quality foundational skills instruction. And we're going to hear from the fabulous Joyce Harrison at the end of this session about some things she's been doing in her own setting. So it looks like we have a wide range of goals, which is great. We have a good chunk of us that are teaching K-2. Big shout out to you all, you're amazing. Some teachers who are supporting third and up and specialist administrator and others. So welcome all. We encourage you to think about how you could use this tool in various roles and look forward to hearing from you through the chat and the poll questions that are remaining. So wanted to start by thinking a little bit about why foundational skills and would love for you to use the chat box. There's a picture of what the chat widget looks like, those two speech bubbles with the dark blue background. And would love for you to type into the group chat box what word or words come to mind when you think about foundational skills instruction. What word or words come to mind when you think about this kind of work? Ooh, nice. I'm going to steal some of yours to share out. I saw things like critical, building blocks, solid foundation, some folks with some content knowledge shouting out things like phonological awareness, the basics, critical for future learning. So lots of thoughts come to mind when we think about this type of instruction. And that could be content, that could be kind of how you're seeing it throughout your day. When I think about foundational skills instruction, one thing that comes to mind is equity for our kids, and that was definitely in a lot of your responses as well. But we know that strong foundational skills instruction is really critical for all kids, and that it's part of their creating equitable access to college and career readiness. And explicitly teaching these skills is really a first critical step, as you all mentioned in the chat, to getting our students on a path to success in school and beyond. So we believe deeply in this work, and we know you all do too. There's been a lot of sort of hubbub out in the world and in the education space about foundational skills as of late. There is one report that's been getting a lot of attention. It's an American Public Media report by Emily Hanford called Hard Words. It's actually a report and a podcast, and it sort of summarizes some of the issues around foundational skills instruction nationwide and how we got to where we are right now. If you haven't listened or read it, I highly recommend that you do, and you can find a link to it in your resource tab, which is that little green box with the paper on the bottom. It'll take you right to the article where you can listen to the podcast too. One of the biggest ideas that came out of this report and podcast is this idea that reading is actually not all that natural. And yet a lot of the instruction that happens and that is happening in schools is sort of underpinned by this idea that kids learn to read naturally, just like they learn to talk. But we know from decades of research that actually kids need foundational skills instruction to become solid readers, and that they become better readers when they're provided with that explicit and systematic instruction. And one of the quotes from the article that I love is about this research really just telling us that kids who can't decode are not going to become good readers. Makes sense, right? And that some kids are going to learn to decode more quickly with minimal instruction. A lot of other kids are going to need more help, but that good phonics instruction is really going to be beneficial for all of our kiddos, even those who are going to learn to decode more easily. They're going to become great spellers, which is important too. Really encourage you checking out that report if you haven't gotten a chance to yet, or sharing it with your colleagues. So all of this tells us, as you all have been chatting about in the chat box right now, I see you, is that foundational skills instruction, foundational skills really are the foundation of all this great work that we want to do with our students, and that it helps to set the stage while we are working with great text, while we are doing evidence-based discussion, writing, and building knowledge about the world, and that it's critically important that we set our kids up for success with that work. So want to jump in now to talking about this tool and thinking about how this tool can support your work in those efforts to really secure foundational skills for all of your kids. And if you're familiar with Student Achievement Partners, you might know about one of our other tools. This tool is called the Instructional Practice Guide. And this is a tool that you all out in the field, many of you have been using for quite a while. There's a version specific for kindergarten through second grade and observing literacy instruction in the classroom. There's also a math version as well. And as you all in the field were using this tool, we kept hearing from you that while this tool was great and it really helped you to see a lot of things in your literacy classrooms, that the references to foundational skills, that you were craving more in this tool, and that you really wanted more attention and more concrete examples of what you should be looking for foundational skills specifically. So we listened, and the result of sort of that feedback is that we now have two separate tools for observing literacy in kindergarten through second grade. That first tool that I was just talking about is an updated version of the Instructional Practice Guide, and that's for observing specifically reading and listening comprehension. So you're thinking about using that tool to observe a reading comprehension lesson with a rich text, which are going to be primarily read aloud in kindergarten through second grade. The new tool that we're going to be talking about tonight is the Foundational Skills Observation Tool. And this tool is really about observing lessons that are focused explicitly on direct foundational skills instruction and related practice. So this is the tool we're going to be talking about tonight, but if you're looking for tools to help you observe K-2 reading and listening comprehension, you can find that tool on our website. You'll receive these materials after the session tonight, and there'll be a direct link right to that tool. There is still a place in the Instructional Practice Guide or the Reading, Listening, Comprehension Observation Tool that links to sort of supporting this foundational skills work. So these two work in tandem, and they support all the great work across the day that we want to see in our literacy classroom. So the Foundational Skills Observation Tool, we are so eager for your feedback about this tool and to hear what you all think you might do with it and do with it. So would love to start that conversation by asking you to open up the tool from your resource widget. Again, just find that green box. There's a picture of it on the slide right now, and you can click a link that says the Foundational Skills Observation Tool. It will open up in a new tab in your browser, and just going to invite you to find it and take a quick look through it. We're going to be walking through it together, so no need to read it, but just take a quick look. Make sure you have access to it for the rest of our conversation tonight. It's in the resource widget. Great. I see some folks typing into the group chat that they have found it. So just give you another minute to make sure you locate that and make sure you locate it and have access to it for the rest of the session. Great. So glad you guys are finding it. Perfect. If you are having trouble locating the resource widget, I'm going to type a direct link in the group chat as well, just in case. I love educators because they're giving me confirmation that you've all found it. So appreciate that. Thank you. Looks like most of us have gotten a chance to take a look. Again, no pressure to read through it now, but just get a sense of it. We're going to work through this tool section by section so that by the end of today, you really have a solid understanding of the structure of it and what's included in the tool. First, I wanted to tell you a little bit about the Foundational Skills Observation Tool and what it was designed to do. So really this tool, as we've sort of been talking about, is focused on just foundational skills instruction for K-2 classrooms. And the main goal of this tool is to support teacher development. So we want to help teachers get better, and we want to do that through coaching, through planning, reflection, and collaboration. So you could use this tool in lots of different ways to meet those goals. You could have a coach go in and use this tool to observe a foundational skills lesson. At your PLC, you could use this tool to look through the indicators as a grade level team and think about where you might want to push your practice. You could do a self-reflection. There's lots of ways to use this tool to support teacher development. One thing this tool is not intended to do is be an evaluative tool. So this tool is really focused on gathering evidence and promoting discussion, thoughtful discussion, not on teacher evaluation. The other thing to know about this tool is that it was really designed for use with systematic foundational skills programs. Strong materials, especially in foundational skills, are really part of the aligned instruction that we want to see. So it was designed to be used alongside strong systematic foundational skills materials. The last thing to know is that there are lots of ways, lots of classroom structures that we use to teach foundational skills, and this tool is really intended to be able to observe any of those or reflect on any of those. So that could be whole group, small group, it could be centers, independent tasks, partner tasks. So anytime there's really foundational skills work or instruction happening in classroom, this tool could be a useful resource to help support you. If you have any questions throughout, feel free to type them in the Q&A or just so we can get to them hopefully at some point, and Nicole will stop me if there's anything urgent. So a little bit about the structure. If you still have the tool open, you can feel free to sort of work through the pages or watch the slides. I'm going to show you what each of sort of the high-level pages are in this tool. The first page is just an introduction. You can feel free to read that at a later date. We've actually been over a lot of the information that's been covered in the introduction itself, or we will by the end of today's session. Page 2 is a one-pager. The one-pager is all of the indicators or the things we're going to be looking for in a lesson in sort of a slimmed-down one-page sheet. This could be handy if you need a quick reference, but this one-pager doesn't have some of the other information that's coming up on the next 2 pages. It's sort of like a quick cheat sheet. Pages 3 and 4 are where the real meat of this tool live. That's what you're going to be using as you're doing an observation or as you're doing reflection. Those are the indicators with the ratings and some extra information about what to be looking for during the lesson. So that information is on pages 3 and 4. Page 5 is the Beyond the Lesson discussion guide. If you're familiar with our instructional practice guide, this is the idea is similar here. This page is really to facilitate a post-observation conversation. It's essential to the tool, and we'll talk about that a little bit at the end. Just a little bit more to help you get oriented to the tool. There are 4 categories of indicators in the tool. Those 4 categories that you'll see in the tool, and you can probably follow along with me, are the aligned content indicators, the teacher-directed instruction indicators, student practice, and assessment and differentiation. Those 4 buckets are sort of like your lens for observation. So the indicators under those buckets go together under those categories, and it can be a helpful way to sort of organize your thinking. When we're talking about indicators themselves, if you're on pages 3 and 4 of the tool, you can see on the left-hand side that those are bolded, and they also have a little shorthand. What's on your screen right now is the Aligned Content Indicator 1. So it's labeled AC1, Aligned Content 1, and that's those bolded items are the indicators or the things we're going to be looking for through the lesson. Underneath that, you can see the rating. Ratings are optional for this tool. It's a way to start a conversation about how well the indicator was met. The right-hand side has where your evidence is going to live. The what to look for column is some ideas of things that you could see in a foundational skills lesson that are related to that indicator, sort of relating back to this desire that we have to really be explicit about naming what we want to see in foundational skills lessons. And you'll see throughout the tool that there are these green links, hyperlinks. Those are companion resources, and they link you out to some great stuff that you can use to support either coaching or your own knowledge about foundational skills. Last but not least, this tool is really focused on gathering evidence. So that evidence is coming from your observation or your reflection. And it's not a focus on evaluation, but really just on naming what you're seeing or what you know happened in a lesson. If you want more information about low inference notes and how to take really great low inference notes, you can find that on our website, Achieve the Core as well. But this evidence for foundational skills can be really a broad range of things. We're thinking about what's in the lesson plan, what are we seeing, what are we observing in exercises, tasks, and assignments, what are we seeing students do, what are we seeing in their discussion and behavior, but evidence could be any of those things. So want to play a quick game now to see just to make sure that you're oriented to the tool. It's going to be a little bit of a scavenger hunt. So would love for you to answer this question using the tool itself. How many indicators are in the teacher-directed content bucket? And you can just click your answer on the screen next to the bubble. Are there 2 indicators, 3 indicators, 4? Or are you having a little bit of trouble figuring out where the indicators are under the teacher-directed content bucket? I'll give you about 20 seconds to take a look. If you're typing in the group chat, don't forget that you can actually click your answer on the slide screen next to the number with the bubble that you see so it can show up in our poll. All right. Looks like most of us found 3 indicators and a couple of us are still looking. So I'll show you what this looks like on the tool. If you're on page 2, that's the one-pager, you can see under the teacher-directed instruction bucket that there's 3 indicators listed there. If you were on page 3, I highlighted those in blue. So kudos, everybody. It looks like we're getting a little bit more comfortable with where things are located in the tool. Very nice. One more quick scavenger hunt question. What are the rating options under the AD1 indicator? And bonus points if you know what AD stands for. All right, let's see. All right. So AD1 is AD1. I'm going to show you a picture on the screen. Is the assessment and differentiation bucket. And actually AD1 is the teacher collects student data, formal or informal indicator, and the ratings underneath that are yes and no. I have a feeling that folks might have been looking at the aligned content indicator if you took a look at some of the other answers. So glad that we're getting more comfortable with the tool. And don't worry if you had any trouble finding that. We will be taking now a look at each category sort of step by step. If you have any questions, feel free to type those in the Q&A, and we'll try to get to those as best as we can. Thanks, Nicole, for managing the Q&A for us. All right, so let's hop in and walk through this tool together. Really excited to dig into this content and keep the group chat up. I see lots of great conversation happening over there. We're going to look at the tool and look at each of the indicators and the buckets. And to do that, we are going to sort of put our brains as though we are observing a mock kindergarten lesson. So I'm going to be talking about the indicators and presenting you with some evidence from this lesson that you might be writing down on this tool if you are observing this teacher presenting this content and having students practice with this content. So this first bucket of indicators is the aligned content bucket. And this bucket is really all about sort of what the content is that you're seeing students working on and teachers instructing on, and also how it's presented. Is it presented in an age-appropriate way? So the first bucket, AC1 or Aligned Content 1, is all about whether the instruction that you're seeing and the skills that students are practicing are representative of foundational skills grade level standards. So to observe this in a lesson, you might be thinking about jotting down what the content is that you're seeing. You'll see on the right-hand side that there's a space for you to note which of the big 4 foundational skills buckets those skills are falling in. There's a note there that reminds you that it's not a bad thing if not all of these elements are included in every lesson, but it's a way for you to gauge sort of what's happening. You may want to, after observing a lesson or reflecting on a lesson, check back with your foundational skills, the Common Core or College and Career Ready foundational skills standards to see whether those standards are representative of grade level standards. Again, ratings in this category and in all the categories, if you're seeing foundational skills instruction that is not representative of grade level standards, that's a conversation starter. So no in this case does not necessarily mean bad. For example, if a teacher is working with students to fill gaps from previous year's standards, but it's a conversation starter to have a conversation about what you're seeing. I saw a great question from Kelly in the group chat that I just want to pause to address about whether this is an observation tool. And this is a foundational skills observation tool, but you can use this tool in lots of ways to also reflect on your own practice. Think about your lessons, your materials. So if you're in the classroom yourself, there's lots of ways to think about how to use this to reflect on your own practice too. The next indicator is AC2, if you're following along with me. And this indicator is all about whether the foundational skills that you're seeing in a lesson are part of a systematic scope and sequence. And really what that means is that the materials that you're using have a detailed plan of exactly which foundational skills are taught when, so that a child's K-2 experience is really setting them up for success. So this could either be observed in a lesson, or you could be reflecting on your own practice and materials to think about whether there is a systematic scope and sequence of skills. If you were in a lesson or you were thinking about your own lesson, some evidence of this might be thinking about a teacher saying in this kindergarten lesson, yesterday we learned how to write the A sound, and today we have a new sound. So that is evidence that yesterday students were working on this skill, and today we're actually starting a new skill. You may also see around the room something like a sound ball where it's really clear what students have been working on, and they have access to that knowledge too. I love, thank you, Darlene, for that wonderful comment in the chat that this tool could also be used to ensure that your planning is really effective, and you could use this as a check on yourself as you're planning. Darlene, great comment, thanks. AC3 is all about whether the elements of the lesson are presented in an engaging and child-friendly manner. And I think that I really believe that foundational skills instruction can and should be fun for kids. And we're looking for here as evidence our kids to learn critical skills. Are they moving? Are they singing? Are they chanting? Are they doing things as they learn? And this doesn't mean that kids need to be having a dance party for your entire foundational skills block, although I certainly encourage dancing. But it does mean that we're on the lookout here for how are we presenting this content so that it's engaging and child-friendly. We'd love for you all to take a quick moment in the chat and think about what evidence for this indicator would look like to you. What have you either seen as you've been observing or done in your own practice that feels like it really meets this indicator well of elements of the lesson being presented in an engaging and child-friendly way? Can't wait to see what you all think. Go ahead and type that in the chat now. I love these ideas. If you're reading each other's, there's some fabulous ones here. I see a lot of folks talking about moving. So there was an example of for phonemic awareness or listening for sounds and words using the four corners of the room so that kids were moving to the four corners to show that they knew one of the phonemes that they were listening for. A lot of things about songs, clapping, movement, acting out the meaning of words that were decoded. That's a great one. Actions or movements associated with sounds, also fantastic. I saw one comment coming through about the affective enhancements that's actually linked in the tool itself. This is one of those companion resources. It's a quick one-pager of ideas that you could use to support yourself or a teacher that you're working with in how to use some more and integrate some more engaging and child-friendly how to make your content more engaging and child-friendly. So check that out if you haven't already. Awesome. Keep the ideas coming. For this kindergarten lesson that we're talking about, one thing that you could do that would be evidence for this indicator would look like maybe doing a riddle. And this is sort of building on that idea of moving to the four corners of the room that was mentioned in the chat. But it could sound like, okay, it's riddle time. The answer to this riddle will begin with our new sound. When you think you know the answer, whisper it to your partner and then stand up. Ready? I'm thinking of something inside your mouth that you use to chew. And I can just picture kiddos having a great time thinking about the answer while practicing listening for the sound at the beginning of a word. And this is really a critical skill so that they can then, in the later part of the lesson, learn how to write that sound. So this would be a great example of strong evidence for this indicator. So that was the aligned content bucket. We're going to move now into the teacher-directed instruction bucket. If you have any other ideas or thoughts on the aligned content, feel free to keep them coming. So this teacher-directed instruction bucket is really all about your teacher lens. You're thinking about either yourself, if you're doing your self-reflection, or you're thinking about looking at the teacher-directed moves in a lesson if you're doing an observation. And this is really all about what the teacher is saying or what you're saying, what you're modeling, and what you're assigning. This first indicator under TD1 is really all about your instruction. Is your instruction in this lesson explicit and clear? And that is a tough thing with foundational skills. So this is really asking us to think about how clearly we are modeling, explaining concepts of foundational skills. There's some ideas in the what to look for things that you could see that would be evidence for this indicator, like clear and articulate teacher pronunciation of sounds. So you want to be really attuned to thinking about how are we presenting these phonemes to kids, and are we pronouncing them, are we articulating them correctly? For example, not adding a schwa sound. If you're saying the b sound, not saying b, so that kids are thinking that that b sound is actually b. There's an example from the kindergarten lesson on the bottom here, and it's evidence for this indicator of how the teacher is trying to be, is being explicit and clear. She's saying, I'm going to show you how to write this sound, watch me. And she might even model for students how she's making a long line down, lifting, making a short line across to make the sound. Other evidence for this indicator might be visual aids or other things that are around the classroom environment that can really support this work. TD2 is thinking more about the instruction and practice materials and how we're actually asking kids to make meaning as they're working on foundational skills. So we're not just asking kids to listen or decode or encode for the sake of doing that. We're asking them to do that so they can ultimately make meaning from doing so. So we're looking for things that could be like decodable text, where they are practicing using their foundational skills in context with text-dependent questions. This could also look like helping to build students' vocabulary and understanding of a task by making connections to new words that might be unfamiliar to kids. So in this lesson where the teacher is talking about the sound, she's actually using on her visual aid a top. And kids are likely familiar with the idea of top to bottom. But this teacher actually selected a picture of the toy top. So it would be it would be evidence for this indicator to take kids into the idea that, oh, a top can actually be a small toy that spins on its pointy bottom, so that kids are connecting the word top to its meaning and not just that picture. TD3, again, this is in a teacher-directed bucket, so we're thinking about how the teacher is creating these experiences for kids. But TD3 is really about a balance between the instruction, the explicit instruction that's happening in a foundational skills lesson, and the practice opportunities that kids are getting. So you'll see what to look for, that there's a nod to appropriate pacing. So we're thinking about how the instruction is being balanced with lots of opportunities for kids to practice new skills that they're learning. So you'll see in our example here from the lesson that we were looking at, so the kindergarten lesson, that the teacher might be asking the students to write this sound in the air a few times before going back to actually work on this worksheet, where students are going to practice writing their new sound only under the pictures that start with. So this is an example of, from the last slide to this slide, how the teacher is, the evidence for these two indicators are about the balance of her instruction, her explicit instruction, and how much practice kids are getting. If you're thinking about this for your own practice, you might think about reviewing your lesson plan and really annotating sort of where you're doing direct instruction and where kids are getting practice. You can think through yourself or with a colleague what that balance looks like for your lesson. One thing you may have noted in this bucket is that there is a little bit of something different in this category for the first time under the ratings. You see under TD1 that there's an NO, and that's for not observed. Not observed on this tool means simply that you didn't see it during the lesson. So it didn't happen, you didn't see it. NA under TD2 is actually for not applicable. Not applicable, on the other hand, means that it doesn't apply to this lesson or to this part of the lesson that you saw or you're thinking about. So NA, in this case, not applicable if we're thinking about the last task that students are doing. If you're using, so for TD2, thinking about connecting foundational skills to making meaning, that would be not applicable if you're using lots of words that it is extremely likely that kids already know the meaning of. So if kids are practicing segmenting or blending with words like hat, cat, or tag, which all have the sound, you might use NA here because it is unlikely that the teacher needed to create meaning making for his or her students. On the other hand, if the teacher was using words like top, kit, tug, or top as in the toy, you would expect probably that the teacher might be helping students to make meaning about those words, since it's possible that students might not know the meaning of those words and therefore be able to connect foundational skills to meaning. We'd love for you now to reread TD1 and think about when you might select NO for this indicator or not observed. When might you select not observed for this indicator? I'd love for you to type your answer in the chat whenever you have it ready. When would you maybe use not observed for TD1? All right. You all are on it. I see a lot of examples about if students are actually doing in the practice portion of the lesson and you didn't observe any explicit instruction, this would be a time to just click NO, not observed, I didn't see it. And of course, have a conversation or reflect with yourself about why NO is used there. Great, those are great ideas. All right. Student practice indicators. These are some fun ones that are coming next. And practice, as we kind of mentioned at the beginning, could look like a lot of different things in foundational skills instruction and can vary a lot throughout the lesson or even throughout the day too. This could be tasks, it could be centers, games, it could be worksheets, and it could be in any number of structures as we kind of talked about at the beginning. It could be whole group, small group, partners, independent. It could be oral. So there's lots of evidence that you can collect for student practice, and it can be in lots of different forms. So SP1 is all about whether the practice materials, and remember that could be whether the practice, and that could be either materials or it could be oral practice, are aligned to what the targeted content and skills are. So is what kids are practicing either orally or in writing or through games and other tasks, is it aligned to what the foundational skills focus of the lesson is? Either that lesson or previously taught skills. So an example here for our lesson, we already saw this worksheet that kids would be thinking about whether these pictures started with that initial sound. Another aligned practice opportunity might be thinking about a sound hunt. So there might be a sound hunt center where kids are looking for things around the room and talking and drawing about them with their partners, and looking for sounds, looking for objects that start with or ah. Those are the current and previously taught skills. Non-aligned practice would look like foundational skills work that's really not aligned to the current or previous skills being taught. What do you all think about this worksheet in the middle, this turtle coloring worksheet? Do you think that this is strong evidence for this indicator, SP1, or do you have questions about it? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the tool in the chat box. I'm going to great. Lots of comments. I'm going to steal one that I saw that just said nope. But a lot of you were commenting on how this is not actually asking kids to practice the skill at hand. And while it might look at first glance to some folks that this is an aligned practice opportunity because it has the letter that kids are practicing, as Julie just said, there's no thinking involved and they don't actually have to use the knowledge that they just gained in order to have the meaningful practice. That doesn't mean that we can't do coloring. We could definitely have coloring with the sound hunt example that's on the screen. We could have a different type of activity where kids are actually doing some thinking about whether to color objects that have that sound. But this in itself would not be a great example of an aligned practice opportunity. All right. SP2 and SP3 are all about practice in and out of context. So the last one was about alignment. These two indicators are about different types of practice. SP2 is all about practice in context. And in context here means in the context of connected text or decodable text. So that means that kids have opportunities to practice reading texts that have a high percentage of words with top sound and spelling patterns and high frequency words. So they're getting that practice to read using those skills. The second indicator, SP3, is about out of context opportunities, and really that's about everything else. So those are out of the context of meaningful text, and that could be games, puzzles, music, movement, centers, oral, written tasks, but it's just not in the context of decodable connected text. So for this lesson, this is an early K lesson, and there's an important note under SP2 that this indicator doesn't come into play until after students have learned enough sound and spelling patterns and high frequency words to read connected text. But later in the year, we would absolutely expect to see these kiddos reading connected text with words that have a lot of the sound and spelling patterns that they've learned, and a couple of high frequency words too. For out of context, we've already seen a lot of examples of out of context practice throughout the evidence of this sort of mock kindergarten lesson. Here's another example that might be used later in kindergarten centers where kids are sorting these pictures by their initial sound to practice their sound and some of the other sounds they've been working on. But we've also seen things like the oral discrimination task, the riddles, the sound hunt. So there's lots of opportunity to write evidence for this indicator, SP3, for out-of-context opportunities. SP4 is about students actively participating in the content of the lesson. I think this is a real one to watch out for, either if you're thinking about your own practice or you're observing. This is about who is provided with the opportunity in class to engage in the work of the lesson. And you'll see that the rating scale asks you to sort of make a holistic generalization. Is it all students are engaging in the content of the lesson, or is it few or no students? And I think an example could be helpful here. So if your evidence looks like, could someone come up to write the word cat on the board? If we think about the ratings under this indicator, actually, if most of the lesson looks like that, where one student at a time is going up to the board, few kids are getting the opportunity to really do the work of the lesson. If our evidence looks more like kids having sound cards in small groups and they're working together to spell words, that could look more like evidence for all students engaging in the content of the lesson because all kids are getting a chance to do the thinking. This isn't just about movement and action. So active participation can also mean that kids are fully completing the work, that they're engaged in the content of the lesson in many different structures. So it doesn't have to be that kids are up out of their seats and doing something, although that would be great, and we saw that could be evidence for something else, another indicator in this tool. But we're really thinking here about how many students are provided with opportunity to really practice and think about these skills. So we'd love to open it up to the chat now. I know you all have some great ideas. Ooh, Deborah just had one. But what other instructional strategies would be strong evidence for this indicator of all students actively participating in the content of the lesson? We've already got some from Stephanie and Deborah about using whiteboards, which is great. That is all students participating. Any other ideas? It would be great to see in the chat. Ooh, got some good ones. Letter tiles, so kids using manipulatives and all having the ability to work with the new sound spelling patterns. More love for whiteboards, sand writing, letter writing, air writing. Shaving cream. I tried to do that in my classroom once. It was a disaster. Kudos to you if you've made it work. Maybe leave a comment in the chat about how you didn't get shaving cream everywhere at the end of that. Keep those things going. Lots of ideas for how all kids can get an opportunity to engage in the thinking of the lesson. Joyce, do you have anything to add here about some great ideas that what you've seen?
Yeah, actually, I just put it in the group chat of EL Education, which is another nonprofit open source organization. They have a booklet. It lists various protocols that really encourages student engagement, and it can be found at eleducation.org.
Great idea, Joyce. Yeah, you can, if you Google discussion protocols, EL Education, it should come right up, and that has some ideas that can span across K. Great idea, Joyce. Thanks. So last bucket is the assessment and differentiation indicator bucket, and this is really essential to foundation of skills instruction. If we don't collect data and use data thoughtfully with foundational skills, we're not going to know how we can support all of our kids and provide more opportunities and support so they can master foundational skills. The first indicator under assessment and differentiation, is really all about the collecting of data. And we're talking about collecting data informally or formally, and that could look like lots of different things. I'm sure you all have ideas about how you collect foundational skills data. This could look like, for example, in this lesson, a teacher collecting informal data throughout the lesson on a checklist or on a clipboard, jotting notes to herself about how kids are doing when they're discriminating the sound or how they're doing this sorting activity. That data can be really useful for her to make instructional decisions about what's happening in the lesson, at lesson, and beyond. So this indicator is really about all the different ways that you could collect data, formally or informally, and you might observe, if you're observing in a classroom, that a teacher is doing something like checklisting or writing notes, or it might be as simple as just collecting student work and following up asking, what did you do with that student work? What did you see from that data? 82 is about how we use that data. So that's about how a teacher or yourself is responding to that data to adjust instruction. So that could also be a range of things. That could look like using that data sort of informally by throughout the lesson, and it can be small moves like giving kids feedback on their work, or the teacher here pulling a small ad hoc group of students who are struggling with the discrimination activity onto the carpet so they could review it really fast. It could also look like pre-planned groups and differentiated tasks, depending on how that data is being used. But evidence here can look like lots of different things, from on-the-spot feedback to more of these planned planned differentiation. I'm going to talk really quickly about the Beyond the Lesson Guide because I want to make sure that Joyce has an opportunity to talk to you about the amazing work that she's doing in Shelby. So Beyond the Lesson Guide is that last page of this tool. And if you've used our instructional practice guide, you know that this is an absolutely essential part of the tool. This page is to help you have a conversation with someone, a post-observation conversation, or these questions could be used as thinking prompts for yourself or for your grade team to think more deeply about the evidence that you collected throughout the other indicators of the tool. We know that classroom observations are more effective when they're followed by this type of conversation, and we know that teachers need this type of space to sort of have their own reflection too. These questions are intended to kind of put the lesson in a broader context, so thinking about what happened before this lesson, thinking about what's going to happen after this lesson, and really to help you illuminate some areas for growth or more conversation through thinking deeply about these questions. it really is just intended to be conversation starters. This is all about learning and growing, so thinking about these questions after you have some evidence for what really happened in the lesson is a great way to push practice. You'll see that there's some places in the Beyond Lesson Guide that have grade-specific prompts, and that sort of illuminates a bit more about what we're looking for in kindergarten versus first versus second grade, and even within those grades, how we can push our thinking about what we're seeing or doing. So take a look at those grade level foci just to have an idea about how you might have that conversation with someone you observed, or how you might have that conversation with yourself. All right. Joyce Harrison, this is going to be a treat for you all. I want to introduce Joyce. She is a literacy instructional advisor in the Curriculum and Instruction Department at Shelby County Schools. Joyce, I don't know if you want to talk about your amazing superhero picture for just a second.
Oh my gosh. That is a picture that I never thought would see daylight, but thank you for that.
It's my fault, everyone. Too good. So Joyce works in Shelby County in Tennessee, and she has been starting to use the foundational skills observation tool. So wanted to give her an opportunity to share a bit about what she's been doing. Joyce, how have you been using the tool so far this year?
Well, so far, I'm really just kind of getting acclimated with the tool myself. After reviewing it and perusing it, I decided to use it in conjunction with a tool that we're currently using. In our district, we are engaging in foundational literacy quality reviews of sorts. So we're engaging in some